Welcome to the kickoff and broadcast event for the California African American Education Foundation. Today's topic is your water safe to drink? Thank you for tuning in to learn more about this important issue that impacts us all. We would like to acknowledge our sponsors, the California African American Water Education Foundation, a new nonprofit water education organization based in Sacramento. If you're viewing us on YouTube, and if you have questions, please email them to info@caawef.org. That's info@caawef.org. If you're viewing us on Facebook, please type your comments in the chat box. I want to take the time to introduce our panelists. And with us today, we have the esteemed Mayor Michael Tubb from the city of Stockton, Dale Hunter, who is our executive director, Mr. Edgar Dymally, and Mr. Bobby Bivens. But before we go to our panelists and on Dale Hunter to talk a little bit about the
I think we lost Regina.
Looks like it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. This is Dale Hunter. I have the honor of serving as the executive director for the California African American Water Education Foundation. We are a new organization formed last year with the specific focus of educating and informing African Americans about water in the great state of California. We are certainly honored to have one of the leaders in our great state. Stockton Mayor Michael Tubbs is joining us. We'll hear from him in a minute. We're certainly honored to have him. We also have Edgar Dymally, who serves as the chair of the Association of California Water Agencies. ACWA, as they are known, they represent about 450 water agencies in the state, and they provide about 90% of all the water that's delivered. Edgar also has the distinction of being the senior environmental representative for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We also have with us Mr. Bobby Bivens, who's a longtime community leader in the city of Stockton. He served as a water committee member for the city of Stockton. He also was the water commissioner for the county of San Bernardino, and he holds the distinction of being the president of the Stockton NAACP. We are honored to have all of these gentlemen to join us. Most importantly, we're really pleased to have the mayor of our great city down the road, Stockton, Mayor Tubbs. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got a full plate. We thought we would just kick off and have you tell us a little bit about what's going on in your city, given where we are today, a little bit about your upcoming HBO special, and most importantly, a little bit about water quality in your great city. So thank you so much, Mayor Tubbs.
Yeah, well, thank you, and it's so good to see so many familiar faces and friends on the call on this important issue. So again, Mayor of the city of Stockton, California, like every city in this state and in this country, we're dealing with compounding crises. We have COVID-19, understanding that in Stockton, we have some of the highest rates of asthma, some of the highest rates of diabetes, and some of the highest rate of essential workers in the state. So I've been working overtime to make sure that our folks are taken care of, have access to food, trying to get everyone to wear masks and things of that sort, and also just building kind of the resilience of the community to be able to respond in this time. On top of that, we've also been having continued conversations around structural racism in the midst of the civil unrest from George Floyd. As Mr. Bivens could attest to, in Stockton, because of our history, we've been forced to have this conversation earlier for many, many years. So we're continuing our work on policing reforms. We're continuing our work on building community trust. And we're also continuing our work and figuring out what do we fund and how do we fund. And that's why we're so proud of the Office of Violence Prevention we started. We're so proud of programs like Advanced Peace, and that looks at kind of case management and opportunities as an antidote to crime and gun violence. And we've seen a 40% reduction in homicides and shootings the last 3 years. That's why the work of Stockton Scholars is so important, because we know we have to fund things like education. So for the next decade, every single student from our largest school district is guaranteed a scholarship to a 4-year, 2-year trade school. That's why the work of basic income is so important. And for the last 18 months, we've been piloting a basic income demonstration to show that in times of pandemics and when things like COVID-19 happen, that folks need an income floor to build upon. And that's coupled with the realization that 50 plus years ago, at another time of civil unrest, Dr. King wrote in Where Do We Go From Here, that we have to abolish poverty, that we have to make sure work pays, and we have to do the work of perfecting the union. And a piece of that is making sure that everyone has an income floor. We just passed our budget yesterday with no layoffs, no furloughs, no service cuts. So we're doing the best we can during this time, and we're not out the woods yet, but there is a lot for the citizens of Stockton to at least be proud about. In terms of water quality, I'm so happy we're having this discussion because we know the civil unrest we see with what's happened with the murder of George Floyd is not just about police brutality. It's about kind of the violence of racism in our society, which includes environmental justice, which includes the fact that oftentimes Black folks don't have access to clean water, or don't have access to contracts to work on things that help make the water clean, or don't have access to the employment of those who are able to treat and make sure our water is safe and clean. So in Stockton, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in our Delta Water Supply Project to ensure that all of our residents have access to clean water. So what we see happen in Flint and in communities throughout this country does not happen here in Stockton. Our regional wastewater control facility modifications is a $222 million multi-year project with the goal to repair, replace, and upgrade our treatment process units to meet standards by 2024. We have other projects around improving our water, including our update to our wastewater master plan, our Veterans Affairs medical facility, sewer line extension, preliminary engineering for new regional wastewater outfall, and also sanitary sewer trunk line rehabilitation. We know that in Stockton, one of our biggest assets is the fact that we are so near the Delta, that we're an agricultural community, and we know that it's going to be those assets we use as we continue to chart a brighter future. I'll conclude with saying we were recently awarded a Transforming Climate Community implementation grant for the state for the work we're doing around environmental justice, including making sure folks have access to clean drinking water. So again, thank you for this conversation. I'm looking forward to the work that this group does. And I'm happy that we're having a conversation focused on just the violence of environmental injustice and how do you make sure that all folks in California, and in the case of this conversation, Black folks in California, have access to safe, reliable drinking water.
Thank you so much, Mayor Tubbs, for that. I want to bring in the panel now to kind of set the conversation for what we're going to discuss. And I know the mayor is only going to be able to be with us a short time, so thank you for your words. But let's jump right in. 2012, the California legislature passed AB 685, an unfunded mandate that declared every person has a right to clean, safe, affordable water to drink. And 2019, Governor Newsom signed SB 200 to provide funding to achieve those goals of safe drinking water for every California community. Clean water is essential to life. However, deteriorating water infrastructure and new water quality rules expose the African American community to health risks. This is a public health issue. Unsafe tap water can be found in nearly every county in the state. Unfortunately, areas in San Joaquin County are disproportionately impacted. Water providers are finding more harmful chemicals in drinking water. Stockton sits next to the San Joaquin River and is part of the Great Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. During this time, I think that there were some things that we needed to look at and some questions that people wanted to ask. Dale, could you tell us, how safe is the drinking water?
Well, I certainly can respond. Water in California is safe to drink. Let me repeat that. The water in California is safe to drink. We do, however, have some pockets where the answer to is the water safe could be maybe. The answer to is the water safe could be it depends. But for the most part, the water in California is safe to drink. What we are attempting to do is to make sure and inform the African American community to ascertain what's happening in their own community with respect to water quality. I don't know if Mayor Tubbs is still with us, but I do want to ask him to comment on the challenge of a city like Stockton that's right next to the great San Joaquin Sacramento Delta, which, as most of you know, is the major hub of water for the state of California. I don't see the mayor. It sounds like he's gone. Bobby, if I could real quickly, tell us a little bit about historically the water quality in the great city of Stockton. You are a port city, you're next to the Delta, you're part of the great ag community, which means you've got some water challenges.
Well, thank you and good morning. The water quality in Stockton overall is very good, and there have been some pockets in the south portion of the city where we've had some water issues, and Stockton has 3 different water agencies. So the water and the water infrastructure is all in our partnering, or the city's partnering water districts. Some years back, we had brown water that was cleaned up. The city of Stockton had to chip in with the sub-water providers to clean the brown water, and that was due to rusted pipes. So at this point in time, the quality of water is pretty good when you look at water quality standards. And then when you look at the fact that the grant that the mayor spoke of has just come in to provide education and some changes of structures and water systems and electrical systems that impact the Black community adversely is important. So the bill that the governor signed and the revenue that's coming here into the community will also provide an opportunity for community engagement and the community to actually be a part of the environmental cleanup here in Stockton. And that also covers the Port of Stockton, which has been a contributor to issues with the water in the past. So overall, we're doing good. We have a new, what I would consider a new great thing, and that is addressing the environmental issues, including water in South Stockton, but the inclusion of people from the community and input from the community as well as local governmental leaders is going to be impactful, because now for a change, the people get to speak to those things that are impacting their lives.
And we just wanted to let everyone know again that we are taking questions. So if you do have additional questions for our panelists as this discussion continues on, you can definitely still email those into info@caawef.org or chat them right into the chat box in Facebook. So, let's switch gears a little bit. I mean, I know we're talking about water quality, but water companies in the state must track water quality testing results, and they're required to file an annual quality report each year. Most of those water agencies in the state provide safe, clean drinking water. That's what data is kind of telling us. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, a number of those water agencies are running newspaper ads, ensuring their customers know that the water is safe to drink. However, residents of Monterey Park Tract, a small African-American community in Stanislaus County, don't drink tap water. Arsenic, magnesium, and nitrates polluted their water supply years ago. Some families pay up to 10% of their monthly income on bottled water. The source of your drinking water will dictate the quality, if it's from river water, groundwater, etc. The process to treat clean water will dictate the cost. Water quality is a regional issue. Your zip code can dictate the quality. We've heard that around education, that if you live in a certain zip code, it's going to be dictated by the quality of education that you might receive. So, Mr. Dymally, I would love for you to share your role with us as the water quality chair of the statewide water quality outlook, the correlation between water and economics.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, everyone. A great question. Let me just say, listening to the discussion so far by the mayor and our panelists, it's clear that water is an important issue, and for the reasons that were identified, it continues to be an important issue. But let me just say that statewide, as I think was mentioned earlier, the governor has identified the issue of water resiliency, and I think it was mentioned earlier that the state of California, unique to all the states in the union, it has on the books a law that mandates that everyone has the right to clean, affordable, accessible, safe drinking water. That is a lofty goal, and as Dale was mentioning, there are pockets within California that don't have that. That's typically a function of the size of the agency and the location and the quality of its water. That is an ongoing struggle. It's been an issue for decades. As was mentioned earlier, depending on where you live, many communities of color tend to be in areas that have older infrastructure. And as the portions of the infrastructure only get older, is more of a challenge. There is a correlation between the condition of the infrastructure and the quality of the water. And that's something that everyone should focus on, not just water ratepayers, but communities of color. And as was mentioned earlier, typically they don't have that focus of attention on that issue because of other things in their community. Let me say to you, as an official with the Association of California Water Agencies, that the position that statewide and national agencies have on water quality is that there is going to be more focus, a greater focus of attention on improving water quality. With that focus is going to become greater cost. That will have a huge impact on our community. However, there are lots of resources out there, but it starts with information. It starts with awareness. And that's where I think this organization, Dale's organization, certainly the effort by the mayor of Stockton, that's what we want to do. We want to bridge that gap between a lot of this information and where we need to be, and get resources to the Stocktons and to other communities, particularly communities of color. I don't know if that specifically answered your question, but
no, I think that was awesome. What I was going to say also, though, is I was going to ask about that resources. I think people have heard about a number of probably bond measures that have been voted on in the past that are related to water. So specifically, I think what happens is we go to the ballot box. We vote to support these measures from a statewide level. And then the average person, the people who are in our audience today, hear nothing else about it. We turn on our faucets and the water comes out. We don't know the quality, but we assume that it's probably good. But where we're talking about these challenges, what are some of those resources and support for places like Stockton and other cities in California? Like, where do they get that support?
Yeah, that is such an essential question. I know in my limited access to members of the state legislature and to Congress, when you go to them, and ACWA certainly has, and they ask them for additional resources, the first question they ask me, and Dale's been asked this numerous times, where does that money go? How much money does my community have? And some folks track that information, but if I can leave you with one important issue, it's important that that gets communicated back to the city, to the cities of Stockton and other communities. Who's using that money? Who gets access to it? Because what's important is that communities in need get the money. If it's not, then it's defeating the purpose of the bonds. And a lot of effort goes into securing grants, bonds. There is literally billions of dollars in federal monies that get allocated to this issue: clean water, groundwater cleanup, clean water efforts at a national level. And it's so important that those monies get to these communities. And again, those are things that I think these types of dialogue can focus on. But there are efforts out there to communicate that, but it starts here, finding out how much, as you mentioned, of those bond monies get to local cities and certainly the city of Stockton.
And Dale, I don't know if you want to comment on any of those. I know we're taking in questions. We see one of our viewers, Veronica Alcaron, I hope I said her name right. She's currently has Alhambra water delivered every 2 weeks to her home. I wasn't able to afford this luxury. I definitely have noticed the difference in the quality of water while living in different areas of Sacramento. So Dale, I mean, tell us, I think a lot of people, nobody's a stranger. I have water delivered to my home. I think that that's probably the norm. Or if you're not having it delivered as a service, you are taking the big jugs and you're going, I see people going to the grocery stores or to places to fill up water. Is that because there's this lack of confidence, or do you just think it's a lack of information and communication so that people know that, the water where they live is safe?
I would respond, Regina, two ways. One, this lack of information, and that's part of the role that we at the California African American Water Education Foundation, that's part of the role we want to assume, is to get information out to people. Water can be a complicated subject. It certainly can be a dry subject. And what we want to do is translate this information so that folks can understand it. Secondly, it's important where you live has a lot to do with the quality and the source of your water. And the example that I would use, when I was living in Los Angeles, working for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, early in my career, there was a big survey in Southern California asking people, where is the source of your water? It was a straightforward question. The response was, it's underneath my sink. And technically, that's true. But in Southern California in particular, the source of water comes from great distances, 300 plus miles. And so when that water comes into a municipality or comes into the region, it has to be cleaned, it has to be treated, and most importantly, it has to be a certain quality to ensure that the folks that get it, homeowners alike, are getting good, clean water. So the source of water has a lot to do with the quality, and the source has a lot to do with where you live. We're fortunate in the great state of California. Water is a regional issue. What you think and focus on in water, if you're in Contra Costa County, might be different what you think about and focus on if you're in San Diego. If you're in Sacramento, like the great capital city here, we're surrounded by rivers. So we have different challenges of water quality issues. So the source is important, where you live is important, whether you use bottled water or pay for bottled water, sometimes that's a personal choice. But the one thing we do hope you would do at the end of this discussion is find out who is the supplier of your water. And that may be tricky, because if you're a homeowner, you get your water bill every month and you know who your water agency is, you know who to call, you know who to ask questions. But if you are a renter, you live in an apartment or you lease, you have no idea who your water supplier is, because your water bill is included in the rent or included in the lease. So that's a whole group of folks that here today would not be that engaged, and we want to bring them into discussion as well to ensure that everybody's involved, homeowners, renters, everybody. And where your water comes from is the basic issue. We're not going to solve water quality overnight, but one of the reasons we wanted to do this broadcast is just to let folks know, one, that we're out here to help provide information. Two, there is a little work on your part. If you're a homeowner, pull out your water bill, Google your water company, and find out what they're doing with respect to water quality.
And if I can, I just want to make a point to kind of dovetail into what Dale was saying, is that there's not necessarily a correlation between how your water tastes and its safety. Now, a lot of people will tell you, and it would make sense, that if the water is not pleasing to the palate, then people are not going to drink it. I'm old enough to remember when you would go to a grocery store years ago, there was very, very little bottled water. Most people bought bottled water. My mother used to buy it to put it in her iron. You bought, a deionized water so it wouldn't scale your iron. If you go to a grocery store, there are literally aisles that are dedicated to bottled water. That's a recent phenomenon, and quite frankly, that's to address the issue of taste. People like the way bottled water tastes. It doesn't necessarily mean it's safer, but to be honest, if people are drinking water, that's a good thing. Now, the issue that Regina raised earlier was the issue of cost. If you pencil out a gallon of water, a bottled water, it's more expensive than gasoline. Think about that. Bottled water is very expensive. We have a phenomenon here in Southern California where we have water stores where people literally, as Dale mentioned, they go to these stores with jugs of water, of empty jugs, and they fill it up with treated water. And, water utilities spend literally hundreds of millions, in some cases billions of dollars, to treat water to this high level, and people are not drinking it because they want the taste of bottled water. That's one of the challenges of our time, is that we spend more money on water. There should be the confidence, and the issue is there should be the familiarity with your water that you can drink it. It's certainly drinkable. Now the taste is a different issue. I have my bottle here. I fill it up with tap water. I put it in a refrigerator and I drink it, simply because it's important that you remain hydrated. It's a health issue. Our community needs to drink as much water. We need to substitute that for a lot of the sugary sodas that our kids drink. That's an important issue, and that's a public health issue. And I think that's something we all need to be aware of. We need to educate not only ourselves, but our families, our friends, about the need to have this resource in our community, that when you go to the tap and you fill up your water bottle, you don't even have to think about where it comes from.
If I could, Regina, I'd like
go ahead.
I'm going to add a little bit to that. In San Bernardino, for example, the whole city of San Bernardino sits on top of a great water aquifer, or like a big lake, and they have high quality water. In fact, the water there is better than the water that you go to the store and buy. But if you also think about San Bernardino, there's Lake Arrowhead, and above the city of San Bernardino, there's, for many, many years, going all the way back to the 50s and 60s, you could buy Arrowhead drinking water in the big bottles in a dispenser in your home. Well, that same drinking water is sold in the stores, and if you ever notice, and if you see the little red and green label that says Arrowhead, that comes from San Bernardino's Arrowhead and Lake Arrowhead, and the water in the under the city of San Bernardino. But they also have a different water company that's connected to Los Angeles that brings water in, and it's a regional water system that services cities around San Bernardino and some of the unincorporated areas. So we have, in many, many communities, great drinking water, and some of it tastes very good. San Bernardino water definitely tastes different from LA's, and absolutely different from San Diego's. So those are the kind of things that, people may think, as Edgar said, that the water is not safe if it's coming out of the pipes, when in fact it's, in many instances, it's a better quality than what you go into the store and buy.
Well, many of us talked. I mean, we had a viewer actually just respond. Could Flint happen? So since we're talking about, the way you get the water, but really, the issue with Flint was the pipes. I believe that was right, Dale. I'll let you correct me if I was wrong with that. But, the reality is, Victoria Baldwin says, could Flint water crisis happen here in Sacramento? And I'll let anyone take that.
I can respond real briefly, and Dale, please jump in. Flint was unique by virtue of several years ago, and again, probably about 100 years ago, when a lot of the water systems were being constructed, the use of copper pipes was permitted. Copper was an affordable, an effective medium for transporting water. Unfortunately, if the water conditions are not right, they can literally leach lead out of the pipes. And Flint, Michigan, which had a number of sources, decided to switch source, and the water condition, unfortunately, leached lead out of the pipes, and thus you had that problem. There aren't that many lead service lines in California. Fortunately, that is the case. There are a few pockets of lead service lines throughout the state. Fortunately, decades ago, the city of San Francisco voluntarily took out their lead service lines back in the late 60s, early 70s. That was a very, very progressive move on their part. It alleviated any issue like that. So while that is certainly possible where there is lead service lines, let me just say that the likelihood of that happening in Stockton or in California is remote, by virtue of there aren't a lot of lead service lines here in California. And I'll let Dale follow up on that.
And you know what, Dale, before you do, because I wanted to, there was a comment that just came in, and I want you to speak to this, Dale, because this speaks to really about, maybe what people are just having misinformation and what they believe is, maybe factual or misinformation. But Emma Maxey says that sometimes those machines where you purchase water is tied up to the same water source where you may be paying for at home. Dale, can you tell us, like, what will it take to make sure that people understand that? Is there, in these water bond budgets, is it the water board? Is it the city's responsibility? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that that education happens to the community, and especially to our community?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. But let me deal with the Flint one, since that's one folks are familiar with. Flint was a man-made disaster. The state of Michigan switched water supplies from one river to the next without understanding fully what the new supply would do in terms of those old pipes that Edgar mentioned. In some of our cities in California, the water pipes are 100+ years. Here in Sacramento, I think we've got some pipes that are 105 years old. So those old pipes, some of them are copper. Over time, they leach, meaning the chemical compound of those pipes leach into the water. And before you know it, you've got health issues like Flint. I'm hopeful and I'm confident that our governor, our state legislator, those on this call, certainly the board of the California African American Water Education Foundation, we're on alert to ensure that we have all the information we need so that we don't have a Flint. Flint was the major action that woke folks up that if you don't pay attention, you run health risk with your water supply. So the short answer is, I don't think there's a Flint in California, but we certainly are on guard to make sure it doesn't happen. With respect to the pipes, and this is something that's important, and I'm so pleased that we were able to get support from the California Legislative Black Caucus early on when we were starting this organization last year. The caucus was very helpful. Dr. Weber, Assemblyman Gibson, Senator Bradford, the whole team of the caucus have really encouraged us to be active. And one example of their engagement, Assemblyman Holden from Pasadena. Chris Holden has a bill that's looking at water pipes, fountains, faucets that carry our water to ensure that those things don't leach, to ensure that those pipes that are carrying our water to our kids and family, that those pipes are well made and they can sustain any kind of water going through them. So there is work to look at it from the piping perspective. We're so pleased the caucus is engaged. We're also pleased at the federal level. The Congressional Black Caucus, Edgar and Bobby and I were pleased that the Congressional Black Caucus has taken up water as one of their big issues. That's a major victory. The Congressional Black Caucus, just like the Legislative Black Caucus, they've got a whole bunch of issues that they're dealing with, and we're just pleased that they've added water as one of the issues that they're going to be focused on. We're fortunate that the leader of the caucus is from the great state of California, and that's Karen Bass. The other issue, I think I'll turn to Edgar in terms of the source of water and the issue of bottled water versus regular tap water.
Yeah,
well, the meaning about what one of our viewers saying, that meaning that people don't realize that they are just basically paying possibly. So is that true? When we go to these places to buy water, are we technically buying better what we believe is better, or it's better tasting, or what do they do different that you're just
No,
not?
that's a very fundamental question, and again, people are under the impression, in many cases, the mistaken impression, because it comes from a bottle or it comes out of a machine, it's better. And as Bobby mentioned, many cases the water is just it literally comes out of the cities or municipalities piping system. They run it through a filter and they sell it as bottled water. And the public's perception, well, this is a better water. You see those machines outside of a store, they're literally connected to the city or municipality's water. So the question you asked, Regina, is it better? It's not safer. The perception that it's better. You can improve the taste by filtering it, but probably the single best thing you can do to improve the taste of the water is put it in the refrigerator. I've heard over my career literally thousands of complaints. Well, I taste certain things in my water. If you have a sensitive palate, you can do that. But there are things to do to remedy that. There's these Brita filters that most people have seen. There are all type of filtration devices that you can use at the point of use or at the tap to make the water taste better. But the question you asked, Regina, is it better water? It is not safer. It may taste better, but it's not necessarily safer. Drinking water is the best regulated resource probably in the world. There are more regulations for drinking water than anything, and a well-run water system is a well-regulated water system, and that is not the dilemma here in California, because there are more regulations on drinking water than you can shake a stick at. But the issue you raised is not an issue of safety, it's one of aesthetics or perception.
And Mr. Bivens, I mean, from a civil rights standpoint, I mean, have you received complaints or any type of lawsuits where the NAACP has had to interject in this conversation around water quality and race as it relates to the African American community?
Yes, Regina, and as I said a little earlier, here in the city of Stockton, some years back, in southeast Stockton, which is the area where a large percentage of African Americans and Latinos live, though drinking water was poor quality. It did not meet the state standards. The system had to be shut down, and they had to connect to the city of Stockton, and the city of Stockton had to do water transfers to improve the quality until they could get that system cleaned up and all of the dirty water out. And sometimes if you're near a military base or something, there may be plumes or like a big bubble of bad water that flows through, and you may have to irrigate out the plume of water just so you can have your drinking water to meet the state standards. And as Edgar said, we have the toughest standards in California of any place. So water, and even in Flint, it was a civil rights issue because the people that lived in Flint were being given unhealthy water, which was impacting the lives of citizens and babies and children and causing them not to be able to function well in school because of the lead content. So those are civil rights issues. And even if you don't have water, if you take the Central Valley, for example, in Tulare, Fresno, Madera, Kern, Kings counties, there's constantly water issues there because of the dairies that are located, and from the farms, the leaching of the water of the waste seeping down into the water aquifer or into the groundwater basin, and that has an impact. And so that area of the state of California has to really work hard on keeping the water quality and keeping the water safe.
I'm so happy you mentioned that because I know that we have another question, but I'm so happy, and we'll come back to that question here in a second, but so happy that you mentioned that because I wanted to talk a little bit about forever chemicals, what they are, and I think you kind of hit on what they are when we start talking about water or chemicals or things that start leaching into our water system. So, Mr. Dymally, do you want to take that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Regina. You may have heard recently in the news, and it's been the subject of a lot of controversy from a drinking water quality standpoint, is this term, as Regina mentioned, forever chemicals, or PFAS, which is an acronym for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And in short, it's a class of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of chemicals. And the reason they call it forever chemicals, that when it gets into the groundwater or into water, it's very, very difficult to get out. There are other contaminants like volatile organic contaminants that are relatively easy to get out, but the PFAS, the forever chemicals, are difficult because they're difficult to get out once they're in the water supply. There's a lot of concern about that because now, after preliminary sampling, they're starting to turn up everywhere in very, very small concentrations. They are very expensive, not only to detect, but to treat. But it's one of those new issues that folks should be aware of. You're going to hear a lot about it. Congress is trying to grapple with it, and also California will address it. What I think is important to know, and as I mentioned before, there are resources to find out what's in your water. The water is being tested. You can find out if you have concerns, you can express those. But to answer your question, PFAS is something that you're going to hear quite a bit about, but because Stockton's water supply probably hasn't come in contact with PFAS, probably the most famous or infamous PFAS chemical is the component of firefighting foam. And if you've ever seen gasoline fire, typically firefighters use PFAS or PFAS chemicals to extinguish it. While it's effective, but when it gets into the groundwater, it causes problems. It's also present in a whole host of different products, things like carpets. And once again, they get into the groundwater, they do pose a problem. And that's something, again, folks should be aware of from a information standpoint.
Thank you for that. You know,
if I can, Regina, I just wanted to add one comment on source water. Some cities, the municipal utility serves all the water in that city. For example, in the city of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, they are the primary and only provider of water in the city of LA. In other cities, that's not true. And let's use Stockton. Stockton has the Stockton Municipal Utility Department, which is the primary drinking water supplier for the great city of Stockton. Unfortunately, or fortunately, they have other suppliers that serve that community. So we were so glad that the mayor was on, because he's one that really talks about accountability. And he's got accountability with his own water department. But I thought Bobby could expand a little bit. Who else serves water in the city of Stockton other than your own Stockton Municipal Utility District?
We have the Stockton East Water District, and then we also have Cal Water. So those are two private, in essence, water providers that serve certain portions of the city of Stockton. And then there are some mutual agreements to co-provide or for the city to provide water into their system, because they're not necessarily big enough to service areas now that we've had a lot of growth. And so the growth in Stockton has impacted some of these smaller water providers, and they can't pump the water at the levels that they need to, or necessarily have the ability to clean the water at the levels that they need to. So that's important, that in communities where you have multiple providers, that they're all functioning at the same level. And oftentimes, and it has happened here, where the state has had to come in and say to the other providers that you need to clean up your water, and there's serious penalties and fines or if your water quality doesn't meet the state mandated levels. And in California, we have the highest standards for water of any state in the nation. So that's important. It's the coordination and making sure that the water is flowing in the same at the same level of quality and safetiness.
So, as we talk about that, because obviously I know you guys can talk about water all day, but we have another question, and it says, is fluoride harmful in tap water? So I think this is probably every mother's, if you have young kids, you're trying to think, do you put the fluoride in or not? Because obviously this could lead to cavities if you don't have it in, and all the other kind of things that can happen. So to answer that viewer's question, is fluoride harmful?
I'll take a stab at that if it's okay. Fluoride is a naturally occurring substance in most surface and groundwaters. The principle behind drinking water fluoridation is to optimize that level to about 0.7 milligrams per liter. That's the level which is considered optimal for drinking water fluoridation. And I could spend a whole day talking about fluoride. It's to some degree controversial, but I think what folks should know is that at those levels, fluoride is considered safe, and it is beneficial, particularly for kids who have forming teeth. The principle behind fluoride is to optimize it, as I said before, so that it will help aiding in the development of teeth. You should know that most respected public health and epidemiology focused organizations have lauded the use of fluoride in the prevention of dental cavities. I was at a Santa Monica City Council meeting many years ago when they were debating this issue, and the board members or the city council members were torn between whether to add fluoride or not. And a nurse approached that group and she said, I have no interest in this other than I look in wet little mouths all day. And she made the point, to the extent that kids don't have dental cavities, they can lead normal lives, they can learn. But dental cavities or dental problems plague certain communities, and the effort behind fluoridation is to aid in the prevention of cavities. And it's a very, very well established public health benefit. But to specifically answer the question, fluoridation or fluoride in water is safe and done at safe levels. And again, most fluoridated water supplies are fluoridated at about 0.7 milligrams per liter. If it gets higher than that, it's probably not so much that it's bad for you. It leads to something called dental fluorosis, which is a condition known as mottling of teeth. You may have seen people with kind of brown discolored teeth. That's called mottling or dental fluorosis. But for well fluoridated or well maintained systems that fluoridate, it's perfectly safe.
Well, I wanted to definitely just save some of these best questions for last, of us turning this discussion. I'm sorry, I'm seeing on the screen here. Let's see here. I see here, when living in the Center Parkway area, we could literally see particles in the water, and they had a funny smell. Now we're living in Elk Grove area, and there's known to be hard water. Is this a concern?
Let me just speak to the issue of hard water, and I'll leave it to Bobby and Dale to talk about the other issue. Hard water is not, again, a health issue. Hard water, to some degree, contains minerals that may be beneficial when consumed. But as most of you know, hard water can result in scale on plumbing and pipe fixtures. That is an issue. But hard water in itself is not a health issue. It's not a concern that people have. It's, again, it falls into that category of aesthetics. Hard water is more of an aesthetic issue with plumbing. It is not an issue. It's not a health issue. Hard water in itself is not a problem in terms of health. Now, it may cause problems with the pipes, but it will not cause problems. And again, as Bobby mentioned, it is regulated. There are standards relative to what's known as total dissolved solids or salts, which contribute to hardness. but it's not a health issue, even at relatively high levels.
Great. So let's talk about the economics of this. I mean, I only have you guys for, about 9-10 more minutes. And I want to look at what are the, we're looking at efforts to improve infrastructure in the Black community. What are the economic opportunities in relations to contracts and jobs? How does one get into the water industry and start taking advantage of helping to make sure that they start, being a part of this conversation?
I'll take a shot at that, which is, I think, part of the mission for our organization is not only to help inform and educate our community, but to do two other things as well. One, to try to find an on-ramp into the water industry, a career on-ramp for African Americans. It's a great industry, good paying jobs. You don't have to be an engineer. So that's one thing, is trying to find a career track into the water industry in California. The second one is business opportunities. As Edgar mentioned, the water industry is a big industry in our state. They spend lots of money to ensure safety. They spend lots of money to distribute and transport water, to store water. And so one of the things of our organization is to tee up the issue of business opportunities in the water industry. And we think, obviously, the timing is certainly perfect. But those are the three things that we want to do as the California African American Water Education Foundation, is to provide information to folks, to make sure that they understand that the information, they'll have to do a little work. This is not one of those issues that you can Google and be an expert. And also, it is not one of those issues that at the end of the day, you have to make sure you know a little bit about what you are talking about. And that's why I would suggest everyone on the call or listening, if you don't know who your water provider is, either look on your bill or ask your landlord, because that's the first step in understanding. And if I could, Regina, let me just talk a little bit about our organization. We are a startup. We were formed last year, and I'm honored to serve as the executive director. But I have an incredible board of California leaders who took the time to be a partner in forming this organization, to embrace and vision that African Americans should be and must be informed on one of the big policy issues of our state, and that's water. And I want to personally acknowledge my board, because I would not be here but for their leadership and their support and commitment. Our chair is Gwen Moore. She is president of GEM Communications in Los Angeles. She also has the honor of being the president of the Los Angeles Black Business Association. She's also a former legislator, very familiar with this issue, both from a policy perspective and from a practical perspective. Our vice chair is Mr. Rick Callender from Santa Clara Valley Water, also known as Valley Water. Good news, Mr. Callender was recently selected to be the CEO of Valley Water. There are maybe 2-3 African Americans that head large water agencies in our state. And then our treasurer secretary is Ms. Carolyn Veal Hunter, one of the best lawyer lobbyists in the state. She represents a number of utilities with strong background in the utility business. So we have great leadership of our officers, but we have others. We talked about water being such a regional issue, and we wanted to make sure that our entire state is represented, also not just the public agency. So we have on our board, and we are honored, the chairwoman of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, the largest water agency in the United States, is on our board. We have Mr. Robert Luke, a businessman, very successful businessman, have very limited knowledge about water, but that's what we want so that we have clarity and focus on the business side of things. We have Jasmine Hall, who's the vice president of the Inland Empire Utilities Agency, otherwise known as IEUA. They're based in Chino, but they serve the San Bernardino Riverside area. We have Miss Emma Maxey, recently retired from Golden State Water. We talked about public water agencies, but we have a number of private investor-owned utilities that serve our great state. They're under the jurisdiction of the California Public Utilities Commission, but they also are a great player in water in California, and we're honored that Ms. Maxey can represent the private investor-owned utilities. We also have Mr. Harold Williams, who serves on the board of West Basin Municipal Water District in Carson. Harold is a former Public Works Director for a number of South Bay cities, longtime engineer, very knowledgeable about how to move water, and we're thrilled. And we also have Mr. Steve Wells, the General Manager of the Contra Costa Water District, one of the great urban agencies in Contra Costa. So we have a full plate of leaders from all parts of our state representing different sectors of the water infrastructure. But most importantly, I just wanted to thank them publicly. You will hear a lot about our organization and our board as we go forward, but I at least wanted the audience to get a flavor of the folks that are leading us to ensure that, one, we stay on point, two, that we do focus regionally. What's important in Stockton for water might not be important if you live in Oakland. What's important in terms of water in Sacramento might be totally different if you live in Orange County. And so part of what we wanted to do today was just tee up the issue. I know it's not exactly the kind of discussion most are used to or interested in, but we're going to bring it to you to ensure that we have a vehicle to talk to you. Career track opportunities, obviously, we're going to focus on that. Business opportunities, a great industry to think about business opportunities for small African-American owned businesses. And most importantly, to ensure that folks in our community pay attention. There's going to be more and more about water quality as we go forward, more and more about water in general. I mean, droughts, floods, those are the kind of things that typically get folks' interest. And we're going to stay on point to ensure that between all those big events that we're providing information to our community so that they can make sure they've got what they need to be informed about their water supply and how water moves into their home.
Let me just add one real quick point to what Dale just said. And Regina, you asked the issue about the economics. Water utilities are unique by virtue. You don't really have a choice whether you want to use water or not. You have a choice when it comes to cable. And while I wouldn't want to live without electricity, theoretically you can. You cannot exist without water. You need it for sanitation. You need it for, bathing your children. You need it. And it represents an incredible investment. If you drive down the street, you literally drive over hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars worth of investment in those facilities. And they belong to you as ratepayers, as taxpayers. Those are your investments. You have a right to know about them. You have a right to have a say in what's selected. Listening to the mayor earlier today, you have someone who cares about that issue. Several years ago, the mayor of Atlanta was dubbed the infrastructure mayor. She took an active interest in water and wastewater in her city because as the cost went up, they were finding that necessarily the quality of the product wasn't going. So she took an active interest in that. She saw that there was federal monies that came in and she got people involved. I'd love to see that happen here in California and Stockton. But I just wanted to say that, this is a key opportunity. Dale's organization is focused on this, and this is a great opportunity for the people of Stockton, African Americans all over the state to engage in this important issue.
Well, we're coming to the close of the hour. I'm going to let you go ahead and speak, Bobby, but I know we're coming to the close of the hour, but go ahead.
I just wanted to say that you spoke about the water opportunities for employment. You can get go to school for 6 months and become a water operator or a wastewater operator. And you have to get a state license, but now it's only 6 months. You can go to the local community college in most places and or go through some of the local government job training programs to become a water operator or a wastewater treatment operator. So those jobs are out there. They pay great money. and I ran a water treatment and wastewater treatment program many years ago to train Black people to do that, and they can do it. Those are great jobs to have. Thank you.
And I know that we're coming on the close of the hour, but we got one more question that I wanted to sneak in here from a Stockton resident. Miss Janice Bird says, is it fair to have 3 different water bills on one bill? So I don't know if that's a question, Dale, for you or Mr. Dymally.
I live in the great city of Los Angeles. When I get my bill from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, it has 5 components. It has water, power, it also has sewer, it has solid waste collection and other fees. So as Dale was mentioning, you need to be aware of what that bill is. And the water in the city of LA is relatively cheap to the power. The power by far you pay more for, but that's not uncommon. Again, you're not, some entities are actually billing you for other things other than water, but you need to be able to read that bill and understand it. If you don't, contact the entity that's issuing it. They should be able to explain it.
Well, you know what? I want to thank everyone who joined our show today. Mayor Tubbs for giving his wonderful remarks. Mr. Bobby Bivens, who's the president of the NAACP in Stockton, Mr. Dymally, and Mr. Hunter. I want to thank you all. If you have further questions or want to learn more about water quality, please just go to www.caawef.org. That is, once again, www.caawef.org. It's also running across the ticker at the bottom. So thank you so much again for taking the time today. And I just hope that you guys have a fabulous day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.